So your spinal cord acts as like a relay station. If you have a pain signal coming in through the peripheral nerve, it meets up at a junction in your spinal cord before heading up to your brain. So if we zoom in on this, we get a cross section of your spinal cord. That peripheral pain signal is coming in through the dorsal horn where it meets up at this junction, which if we zoom in, we have the first nerve and then we have the second nerve. On the second nerve is where we find that NMDA receptor. And under normal conditions, that receptor has a built-in safety lock in the form of a magnesium ion, which blocks that channel. So when pain signals are coming through the first nerve, they can't get into the second nerve to be transmitted to the brain. In order to be activated, this receptor needs two things simultaneously. The first is that pain signal from that first nerve, and the second is the neuron has to be sufficiently electrically stimulated in order to bounce that magnesium off, opening up the channel. It's a brilliant mechanism. It's like a two-key system on a nuclear submarine. It ensures that only the most significant pain signals actually get through to your brain. So when pain signals are repeatedly coming in from an injury, inflammation, nerve damage, all the emotional contributors of chronic pain that I'm not allowed to talk about here, they bounce off that magnesium. And now if we zoom in on the receptor, we've got calcium ions that are able to just freely pass through that receptor, which sensitizes this receptor, making it easier to activate for the next stimulus and the next one after that. This receptor is now sensitized, meaning that it's going to fire when it shouldn't. It's going to fire to stimuli that shouldn't cause pain, and it's going to fire stronger and longer than it was designed to. This is the molecular basis behind central sensitization. It's a hallmark of all chronic pain conditions. Your central nervous system, brain, and spinal cord are becoming more sensitive to pain. And here's the explanation for why so many people don't get better. Once this is set into motion, this will sustain itself completely independent of whatever originally caused the pain to begin with. So the injury can heal, the inflammation can settle, but this receptor is still stuck in the on position, sending all of those pain signals through to your brain, telling your brain that you're in pain all the time when you shouldn't be. In the next 3 videos, I'll explain exactly how this receptor gets unblocked and stuck in that on position. Because once you understand how it breaks down, you'll better understand how you can fix it. So save this video and share it with someone who's been told that they'll just have to live with their chronic pain forever, because they don't have to. When nerves are trying to transmit a pain signal from one nerve to the next, they release glutamate. Glutamate tries to go through that receptor to signal the next nerve to carry that pain signal through, but it can't, because this receptor is being blocked by a magnesium ion. So that pain signal can't keep going. Substance P, however, binds to that receptor and it kicks off that magnesium ion, allowing glutamate to come through and that pain signal to carry on and go to your brain to be processed as pain. So substance P is clearly an issue. What can we do about it? Luckily, capsaicin, the molecule found in some foods that make them spicy, also found in a lot of topical analgesic creams, and curcumin, found in turmeric, help reduce the amount of substance P released by that first nerve. Magnesium not only helps restore the block on the NMDA receptor, it helps balance glutamate levels. And movement, I'm not even talking exercise, just sustained movement, helps desensitize that first nerve so that it's less likely to release substance P. These aren't magic bullets. They're not going to work as quickly and initially as strongly as other pharmaceutical interventions will, but they do address your biology and the mechanisms in question so that you're not stuck in a perpetual cycle of relying on drugs to reduce your chronic pain. When this NMDA receptor is repeatedly opened, calcium is able to rush in. And when that does, a family of enzymes called kinases get activated, and they put phosphate groups all over this receptor, which changes the structure and therefore changes the behavior of these proteins. Enough phosphate groups, and this receptor gets rebuilt to just stay open all the time. That means more pain signals getting transmitted from the first nerve to the second to your brain to be processed as pain. And now the thing with chronic pain is these receptors are constantly being built inside of this nerve. And there's a protein called alpha 2 delta 1, not super important, that shuttles this receptor to the surface where it can be expressed and transmit even more pain signals from the first nerve to the second to your brain. Now, this is where medications like gabapentin and pregabalin come in. They block the activity of this protein so that the receptor cannot go to the surface to do its job. The only issue is any receptor that's already on the surface gets to continue its job. So it's not stopping pain in the way you think it is. It's only preventing more receptors from being built. There's a clear limitation to these drugs. Luckily, there's a lot of other interventions that support your body's biology that targets the mechanism in question. Magnesium, we know that it already blocks this receptor, but otherwise, magnesium, omega-3s, particularly DHA, resveratrol, curcumin found in turmeric, they all reduce the levels of these phosphate groups and the ability of these groups to bind to that NMDA receptor. And then resistance training also downregulates this alpha 2 delta 1 protein so that we get less translocation of these newly built receptors to the cell surface. For a lot of chronic pain sufferers who just cannot get out of this loop, the problem actually comes down to their immune system, which never gets discussed because immune systems are just there to fight infections, right? Well, they're actually involved in pain processing and tissue healing. And in order to do their job, they sometimes have to make the problem worse before it gets better. And if you're suffering from chronic pain, it's always getting worse and never getting better. In your central nervous system, so brain, spinal cord, there's specialized immune cells called microglial cells and astrocytes. In response to pain, microglia release inflammation, which is one of the sensitizers to open up this NMDA receptor. Astrocytes, they're supposed to be clearing glutamate, which remember is that excitatory neurotransmitter that sends pain signal from the first nerve to the next to your brain. So glutamate doesn't get cleared. And then it also increases the amount of D-serine in your system, which attaches again to this NMDA receptor, being one of the keys that helps open up that receptor. To further highlight just how complicated chronic pain is, to help you understand why all the pharmaceuticals in the world aren't helping you, this just keeps getting deeper and deeper. The inflammation from those microglial cells damage the mitochondria in your central nervous system. Remember, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It produces ATP or energy, which you need a lot of to heal from chronic pain. So not only are you not producing enough ATP, we're now spilling superoxide, which is a very potent free radical that causes a lot of damage. If that binds to nitric oxide, we get peroxynitrite, which is even more potent and even more damaging. But now we got to back up because nitric oxide is a good thing. I prescribe it all the time for chronic pain sufferers who have impaired blood flow. It's a vasodilator. It opens up the blood vessels, helps get more blood, oxygen, and nutrients to those damaged tissues. So this now further highlights just how complicated all of this is, because if you're going to take a good thing but not understand that there's neuroinflammation from immune cell activation, you have damaged mitochondria, free radical production, nitric oxide now goes from a good thing to a very detrimental thing. So all this peroxynitrite, it damages the NMDA receptors directly, so we lose its structure and it's more likely to open when it shouldn't. Two, it interferes with astrocyte activity, so now we're just going to further keep all that glutamate around, amplifying pain. But three, peroxynitrite also kills the enzyme responsible for taking care of superoxide and getting it out of your body. The cycle now becomes self-sustaining. It doesn't need a peripheral pain input to run. It's generating its own fuel. This is why with chronic pain, your pain just keeps worsening despite everything that you're doing. Now the problem becomes our pharmaceutical interventions. There's no drug that targets peroxynitrite. We have anti-inflammatories, but that's just knocking off one peripheral signal. Inflammation is not the only thing that aids in NMDA receptor opening. It's not the only thing that damages your mitochondria. And opioids, they just block this initial signal. It's not doing anything else downstream. So you've tried all these various medications and nothing's working. So now you get labeled as treatment resistant. But the problem is none of the treatments were targeting anything of significance. So it's not that you're untreatable, it's just that we haven't treated the right thing yet. Now, thankfully, there are a lot of nutrients that we have that support your body's biology to target the pathway at all the levels here. Alpha lipoic acid, ALA, is a pretty potent antioxidant that helps reduce superoxide levels, but also balances nitric oxide. So when those levels get too high, it lowers them, so we're not pushing this reaction towards more peroxynitrite. NAC helps create glutathione, which is your body's most abundant antioxidant, helps repair those damaged mitochondria, but also prevents them from creating superoxide in the first place. And then we have palmitoylethanolamide, which is found in like egg yolks, soybeans, and peanuts. That actually helps regulate your microglial cells and astrocytes. So when their activity gets too high, it downregulates them. So we reduce the inflammation and reduce the glutamate and D-serine that are driving all this reaction.